Hi, this is Gary Habermas. I'm the Distinguished Research Professor of Apologetics and Philosophy at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. I teach full-time in the PhD program here, and I have been a guest on the program by Nick Peters on many occasions, and over the years I've noticed how many excellent guests he gets. And I can tell you personally that Nick reads everything that comes his way. He's a great interviewer. He's got good insight and questions, and I highly recommend his program.
You stand on the shore of the ocean watching the tide come in. You sense the call of the sea beckoning to take you further. You step forward little by little, not knowing what to expect, but expecting more. You keep going as the ocean calls you to enter in to deeper waters.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast. I am Nick Peters, your host, seeking to bring you the very best in Christian scholarship and apologetics. And today, we're talking again about marriage. Now, some of you might be wondering, this is a Christian apologetics show. Why would you be giving marriage advice on a Christian apologetics show? Because I think if we're going to win the battle for marriage, we have to start living marriage in a great way, a way better than the rest of the world does. And so to do that, I bring on guests who write about the topic and who I think have something to say, and today's is no exception. I'd also like to let you know in advance that the sound quality as of this show forward until things change might not be as grand as you've been used to. My sound guy can no longer afford to work for free, and I couldn't afford to pay him, so we've had to part ways there some, but we're on good terms. He's still a very good friend and such. I just understand he has things he has to do. He has to provide for his own family as well. Now, if anyone out there does have training in this area and would like to help us, we would greatly appreciate your support and such. So just get in touch with me if you want to do that. But today, we're talking again about marriage, and I've got on here, my guest is Scott Means. He wrote the book, The Path of Intimacy. As a champion for great marriages, he has been writing and teaching about the passion and intimacy found in God's design for marriage for more than 10 years. His mantra as marriage was God's idea, so let's do it his way. As a blogger, encourager, mentor, teacher, and author, he has impacted thousands of marriages through his blog, books, and other marriage resources. Whether your marriage is missing the spark it once had, or you just want it to be great rather than good, Scott's insights help any couple down the path of true intimacy toward a deeply passionate and joyfully enduring marriage. While exploring the beautiful intersection of spiritual and marital, Scott brings these concepts down to earth, offering practical tips and techniques while challenging you to change the way you see your marriage. He pushes back against many of the common marriage paradigms found through secular wisdom, placing them in sharp contrast with wisdom found in biblical marriage paradigms. Scott Means will challenge, provoke, inform, and most of all, equip and motivate you to attain the intimacy, passion, and love you've always dreamed of in your marriage. And he's also not alone today. His wife, Jenny, is here to make sure that he actually is doing the things that he talks about in this book, I suspect. Scott and Jenny, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Now, tell us a little bit about how you got to be doing this. In your background, Scott, it's not in biblical theology or anything like that. How did you just suddenly wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to start studying and talking about marriage?
Yeah, so I'm actually an electrical engineer by training, and my degrees are in that field. But about 15 years ago or so, just kind of for my own personal knowledge, I began studying the Word about what the Bible has to say about marriage, and started writing down some of my thoughts. And I began to also in this season really explore what the love of God looks like, what the love of Jesus looks like, and how that relates to how I love my wife. And the more I studied this, the more fascinated I became by the fact that really God gave us a perfect roadmap, a perfect picture of how I should love my wife and how we should do marriage here on earth by the relationship between Christ and the church.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere I looked in that season, I was seeing the parallels between my relationship with Jesus and my relationship with my wife. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I started writing some of this down, and eventually the Lord in 2010 prompted me to start writing some of this publicly, because I didn't see a lot of it out there. It wasn't being talked about a lot. A lot of times you hear the comparison of Christ and the church, like at weddings and that kind of thing, but wasn't really being talked about as a model for marriage in terms of how to actually practically live out your marriage. So I started the blog in 2010, and then began, my wife and I together developed a curriculum, a small group curriculum for training married couples on this sort of these principles. And we've done that small group. It's a 13-week study, and we've done it now, I don't know, 6 or 8, maybe 10 times. I'm not even sure how many. But and so we do that, as well as I still write at the blog, and just recently published my first book. So,
which is the book we're talking about today, The Path of Intimacy.
Right.
So Jenny, how has he been doing? Is this all talk on his part, or is he actually living it out?
I have to say, the best thing that can happen to any wife is to have a husband who begins to study marriage and how to love your life well and how to love your wife like Christ loves the church. I was not studying those things. I was not looking into Bible studies on those things. We both share a strong spiritual connection and a real surrendered lives to the Lord. But when Scott began looking at these principles, he began to love me just so unselfishly. And I still was pretty much more selfish. I'd have to say that. And there is nothing like being loved selflessly and loved well that makes you just want to surrender to that love, makes you realize the joy in submitting to someone who is living to love you well. And it created the most beautiful, safe atmosphere for intimacy. Like when you know that you're loved, when you know that you're fully known and fully loved, there is nothing like that. And that is what influenced me. And my part of the marriage ministry is just being on the receiving end of that.
Mm-hmm.
She also keeps me honest. Sometimes I'll write a post, and she oftentimes will review my posts. And sometimes I write kind of to women, or I write to men about women, and she'll read it and she'll say, "No, you're thinking like a man. Women don't really feel that way. This is how they actually feel." So she keeps me honest and offers her insights as well. So she doesn't post a lot on my blog, but her influence is there all the time. So.
Yeah, Scott, I'm thinking that there could be a lot of men listening to this, and maybe their wives are wanting them to get the message and such sometimes. But Jenny was talking about how it makes it so easy to surrender to that love and such over and over. And I suspect some guys could have been perking up at that point and saying, wait, does that mean what I think it means?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
It does. It just creates an atmosphere of oneness, whether that is in agreement for your vision, for your life, or whether it's enjoying the oneness of physical intimacy. Mm-hmm. It just creates an atmosphere. It's just like with Jesus. Mm-hmm. When you realize how much he loves you, when you experience the manifest presence of his love in your life, it's easy. You want to give your life to him. You want to give yourself over to him. You don't want to hold anything back. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, we've found the same thing happens in marriage.
Mm-hmm. And a little bit of self-promotion here for you all out there listening. I also happen to have a group on Facebook, and it's for Christian men only who are married, engaged, dating, or hoping to date and marry one day, so we can learn how to be good husbands to our wives. So even if you're not really on the path yet, you can come and you can talk to men who have been married for some time. You can start learning in advance already from them. Just look for a group as Christ Loved the Church. Now, Scott, you start the book talking about how you go to a popular movie where it's decided by the couple that they've discovered they're just really excellent roommates. Now, before I got married to Ari, I did live with a roommate and such, and we found out that, to use the kind of language of the Big Bang Theory, that we did not come with a roommate agreement about what happens if one of us decides we're just suddenly going to get married. And we did manage to work things out pretty easily, but it was a bit awkward. But what makes a marriage, living together with a spouse, different from living with a roommate, essentially?
Yeah, so kind of the bottom line, as I see it, is marriage is your relationship with your spouse is the only other covenant relationship you have in your, other than your relationship with Jesus. And so that sets the marriage relationship apart from every other human relationship in its uniqueness. And what we found is, in our many years of talking and teaching couples about intimacy in marriage, is that they sometimes just kind of lose sight of the value in each other and the value of their marriage. And when intimacy isn't thriving, that's when you become roommates. It's when you're just kind of coexisting, running your lives in parallel, and it comes down to sort of a functional existence, who's going to pick up the kids, what time is dinner, those kinds of things. And when it gets to that point, we call that kind of, alluding to that movie, the kind of living as excellent roommates. It's not hostile, it's negative, but the intimacy is just not there.
Yeah, I often think that what can happen is we kind of reach a point where we start taking one another for granted.
Exactly.
And move on, and we don't really work, because, when a guy's dating the woman, for instance, my guy, he works at it. He when he shows up in the house, he's dressed in his finest clothes, he's on his best behavior and such. And the woman, she's out there too. She's beautifying herself so much. When I came to pick Ari up for the first time for a date, she got up 5 in the morning or so, I think, and just spent hours in the bathroom getting ready for me.
Sure.
And I don't know also how many guys I've heard say, yeah, my wife was all over me when we were dating. She couldn't keep her hands off of me. And then as soon as we got married, all of a sudden that changed immediately.
Yeah, so I would ask the guy, what are you doing differently? It's not always about what she's doing differently, but what as he stopped pursuing her, as he stopped putting forth his best and wooing her like he did before he had the ring on the finger.
Yeah.
I think there's also, with excellent roommates, the issue of maybe unmet needs and possibly expectations, that disappointment. And so we start to kind of live self-protected lives. We're doing things to self-protect ourselves from getting hurt. We don't want to be vulnerable. And so that's more like a roommate. You wouldn't be completely vulnerable. You wouldn't be completely one with them. You wouldn't be as transparent necessarily. And I think that women believe a lie that they don't really need that intimacy, and that possibly living a life of peaceful coexistence, that's good for them. They're fine with that. But they're actually missing out completely on what God intended to be the most meaningful relationship of their lives.
Yeah, I'd like to ask something about that, Jenny, because a lot of times I think we get the idea, it's very popular in church that sex, for instance, is something for the men, and women are supposed to just go along, and just kind of act like you enjoy it and things of that sort. I mean, do you hear that message, even if not explicitly, implicitly, and then what do you think about that message?
I hear that message a lot, as well as I'm aware of what I would call a crisis of sexless marriages.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the different drives. I'm not high drive. I understand about that, but it's not just your drive. It's experiencing the complete fulfillment for yourself physically, but also of living that, enjoying that oneness, that intimacy with your husband, and being the one that can fulfill his life. Mm-hmm. So when I talk to engaged couples, I'm asking them, both the husband and the wife, can you live a life to see that person come into all that God intended for them and be completely fulfilled? Not are they the one that's going to fulfill you? Can you spend your life loving them well, learning how to love them well? And it's just a lie. I just believe that it is a lie that women believe that the enemy has there, that in some way women don't need it, that it's just for the men, that it's only physical, and therefore you don't experience what God intended. It's sort of like with the believer. If you have someone who is very religious, they know the Bible verses, they know what to do and how to behave, but there is not that passionate, growing relationship with Christ. There's just a big difference. And what do you want?
Yeah. Now, this book is all about intimacy. And if we're going to talk about intimacy, it could help to, do what we apologists like to do at the start. Define our terms. What is intimacy?
Yeah, so a lot of people, particularly in Christian circles, I've found, are a little bit afraid of the word sex. So they use intimacy as a substitute when they're really talking about sexual intimacy.
Right.
But I always think of intimacy as being that oneness, that closeness in every part of your marriage. So intimacy includes not just sexual intimacy or physical intimacy, but relational intimacy, emotional, spiritual, financial. It's that living as one in every dimension of your being and of your marriage. And my definition, my shorthand definition, is in all those dimensions being fully known and completely loved. Mm-hmm. It requires vulnerability to be completely known. Because if you think about your closest friends, your closest friends are those who know you the best.
Right.
And no one can know you as well as your spouse can know you. Mm-hmm. And it's risky, and that's a little scary, and it's vulnerable, but you can't have fake intimacy. There's no such thing. So you have to let yourself be fully known, and then be willing to believe that your spouse loves you, even though you have some warts and you have some weaknesses and some shortcomings. You have to bring the fullness of who you are to your marriage.
Scott, I've heard some people talking about that there's a difference between intimacy and sex, and I fully agree there is, but at the same time I also think as a guy that, I could say intimacy is better, but at the same time, but I can't picture having great intimacy without sex as a man.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And in fact, every person, male and female, has different, emphasis in terms of intimacy. So, as a man, I would agree that sex and sexual intimacy is a high need for me, for my wife, and for most women. That emotional intimacy, that connection, so is important for them. So it's and then I have to kind of make a quick statement here that there are some 20% or so women who have a higher sex drive than their husbands. So I'm just describing the typical case, but you often find it said that for men, sexual intimacy is the path to relational intimacy. And Paul Byerly says it actually makes men want to pursue their wives and that emotional closeness. Whereas for women, it works kind of the other way around. They really want to feel that security of the emotional closeness, the security of the solid relationship. And that's what enables them to be open to and even willing to pursue sexual intimacy.
And I'd like to let everyone know that since you mentioned Paul Byerly, we actually did have him and Lori on the show last week. So you can go back and listen to that.
Oh, I missed that show. I'll have to go back and hear that. Yeah.
They're wonderful.
They're friends of ours, yeah.
It was put up just recently, maybe even just yesterday. But if you're here next week, you're going to hear... Well, we're still working on that. I've got 2 different people. One I've asked, and if he doesn't reply, someone else is going to come on instead. So we're working on guests, but I'm quite confident we are going to have one next week. But for now, let's get back to Scott Means and his wife, Jenny. Jenny, I was reading a marriage book some last night, and for a woman to have that sexual intimacy, she needs a reason, she needs emotional connection, she needs to feel safe, things of that sort. A guy needs a place. That is all he needs.
It's true. It's true. I don't know why the Lord didn't make us more alike in that way, except for it causes us both to pursue the other, and you can't be selfish about it. But I think that any marriage and any woman can be awakened to desire. And it just works differently for us. Like we can't feel like it's expected of us, or like we have to do something that kind of puts cold water on it for us. But if we have time to be thinking about it, and if we feel pursued, if we feel desired, it's very similar to a man. It just takes a little longer for a woman. And if we can let ourselves risk giving over to just getting started, then usually all of our thinking and our emotions will follow, and our physical desire too. It just we don't automatically have the physical desire and arousal, and so it takes some connecting and figuring out what works for your wife.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Mark Gungor, who's done Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, he talks at one of his points in his life. Now, some of you men out there, you're married to women who love sex. They just can't get enough. They want it constantly. And I think I speak on behalf of all men when I say we hate you.
It's true. And when we speak with couples and marriage groups, and when I'm encouraging women, let your husband see you naked, let yourself be adventurous, determine what, make some plans to think about sex and what you can do. They don't know what you're thinking. You can change your mind. They won't know it. Flirt with your husband. Even if you don't follow through, they'd rather be flirted with. And the husbands are in the room going, keep going, tell them more. I'm sure there's a lot of husbands who are just eager for their wives to listen to this show right now. Yeah, but there's also women that are really lonely, and they have unmet needs because you both begin to self-protect and pull away. And once there's that gulf, it's really hard for a woman to reconnect. It doesn't take so much for a man to turn towards his wife, even if they've been apart for a long time. Maybe it's easier for them. But for a woman, if there's been a hurt, if there's been a misunderstanding, or if they feel neglected or lonely, it just becomes a cycle, because then the husband feels like a failure. That's no man likes to feel like a failure. Oh, yeah. And so that they're not going to want to be around that and hear what they're doing wrong, hear that they're not enough. Oh, so it just becomes this cycle, and it's just a matter of turning towards each other, reaffirming that you are for each other, you love each other, and you both want to learn how to love each other well, then that really even just
goes a long way.
It goes a long way to connecting.
Yeah, one of the things you all talk about is the importance of bids. And this can be in even small things. We're not talking about making bets or things of that sort. We're talking about tiny little things someone might say that they might even not even be realizing they're doing it. They could try and say, I want to get your attention with this. So, like for instance, my wife will often want me to watch something she's seen on YouTube. And I'd say it, but usually most of the time I think, yeah, this really just doesn't interest me whatsoever. And she kind of knows it, but I usually try to come over and watch anyway and just, you know, I don't fake a response or anything, but that's the way it is. Then sometimes a guy can be trying to flirt with his wife or so to kind of show off for her and things of that sort, and he can be shut down, as it were, and it really does sting at the man after a while because he starts thinking he's not good enough. And for yours work, what you say at this point is this couple is not on the path of intimacy, they are on the path of separation.
Yeah. Yeah, so this idea of bids and response to bids is something that John Gottman of the Gottman Institute, who researches on marriage all the time, kind of coined. And it's the idea is that what they did and what they found in their research is they studied couples over some number of years, and they observed them together, and they recorded how many times when a spouse gave a bid. And I could describe a little bit more what that looks like if you'd like me to. But when a spouse gave a bid for attention, whether their spouse either turned toward them and responded positively, ignored the bid, which means basically just pretended they didn't hear, or actually turned away or responded negatively to that bid for attention. And what they found is that there was a significant difference, and I don't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but there was a significant difference between the couples that were still married. I think they responded to their bids positively like 85% of the time after some number of years, 7 years or 10 years. And the couples that had a much lower positive response rate to the bids had significant higher incidence of divorce after the same period of time. So it's an important thing, and it really does either bring you closer together or separate you, how you respond when your spouse is bidding for attention. And it can be very subtle things. It could be explicit, like what the example you just gave, which is, could you come over here and watch this with me? Or it could be something as subtle as a sigh, or just a comment like, "Oh, what a day! I've had quite a day," or it could be something that doesn't really obviously invite attention, but it's still a bid that says, "There's something going on with me, and I'd like you to ask me about it. I'd like you to respond to it." So.
Yeah. Now let's be clear also, we can give ourselves some grace. No couple is doing 100% on the path of intimacy. We're all making mistakes.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah. We've been at this almost 36 years, and we still tend to sometimes take turns off onto the path of separation sometimes. So, yeah, grace is really important.
Yeah. Now, I like what you said also about, you don't come right out and say something. You want the other person to show an interest. And I think this also applies to what we're talking about with sexuality. I mean, so many wives would love to have their husbands help out around the house. But I can't imagine them being happy if the husband says, "Fine, I'll do it," and goes and starts scrubbing dishes hastily, angry, and says, "Fine, you happy now?" Yeah,
Right.
she's not going to be. But at the same time, though, so many wives can, when it comes to sex, they can just not show any interest whatsoever and do what's called duty sex.
Right.
And a man,
grudgingly, yeah.
yeah, and a man will usually take it because it beats nothing whatsoever, but it's sure not going to fulfill him.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. And that's where the attitude of the heart really comes in. And it's super important to not, to actually find pleasure in making your spouse happy, to actually enjoy blessing them and meeting their needs and giving to them in a way that is meaningful to them, and actually take delight in it. Because I believe it actually delights God's heart too when we love each other well.
But I would say a lot of women are brought up with the notion that for men it is physical, like taught so much that it's such a big physical need for men that I think women believe that's all it is a physical need. And we want more than just meeting a physical need. And it was a huge revelation to me, and it wasn't that long ago when I learned that men, they really need to be desired. They need to feel like you want them, that you desire them. And because a lot of times women, really good-hearted, well-meaning, good-willed wives will think, okay, well, you got yours. That should satisfy you for a little while. Or, we had sex. Now you're good. Just like if it was a hunger pang or any other physical need. It blew me away when I found out that it's so important for our husbands to know that we desire them. Because usually when women aren't responding to a bid for sex from their husband, it has nothing to do with the fact that they don't desire them. It's usually something completely else. But the message to their husband usually is, I just don't want you.
And Scott, I'm kind of thinking you're hearing all this. Part of you is one look and say, "What, it took you this long to figure that out?" But
yeah, it's a process of discovery for sure. That's why I call it a journey on the path, because it's something that we are still learning and growing in every year. Keeps getting better every year. And that's another lie that I would love to address as we're talking about this, is there seems to be a sort of common notion that marriages eventually decline into excellent roommates or whatever. And I don't believe that at all. And I don't believe that's what God plans for us. I believe that every year we should, at our anniversary, we should be able to look back and say, this year was the best year yet. And so that's why I just want to encourage people. If you're in a season of struggle, and if you're suffering from pain in your relationship, just know God's on your side. He's for your marriage, and this can be the best year yet of your marriage. And it should be that way your entire marriage life.
And really smooth sailing, easy, getting along all the time, that is not what necessarily creates a strong marriage.
Right.
We've had a lot of rough seasons, very rough seasons, either with things going on with me physically. We lost a baby. Scott's mom lived with us for 7 years. She had Alzheimer's, and it was very taxing. We've been through a lot of different things, but we feel like going through these hardships and fighting to stay connected is what has really forged such a strong bond.
Yeah, I think it kind of seems like a lot of couples, they do, I don't remember if it's they take each other for granted after a while, instead of realizing I do have someone here that I can be with. And unfortunately, I think one of the mistakes that often happens is that men expect women to think like men, and women expect men to think like women.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I have a chapter in my book where I talk about on-ramps to the path of separation, and one of those is we often, as humans, both men and women, we tend to give love in the way we want to receive it, because if for me, let's say if one of my highest felt needs is a need for respect, and if I try to love Jenny with that in the forefront of my mind, is trying to give her respect, not that she doesn't want to be respected, but for her, that doesn't push her buttons. It's not a high felt need for her. And so I have to learn what is it that says I love you to her, and speak that love language to her. And that's where it really can be challenging, because, men and women think so differently. they come at things completely differently. And so it's a question of just becoming a student of your spouse and understanding what their really top needs are, and then striving to learn how to meet those needs. Because oftentimes, for men and for women, to love their spouse well in the way that they want to be loved doesn't come naturally or easily, because it's different from their own perspective. It's different. They just don't have a grid for it. They just don't get it. And so it can be a learning process over a lot of years to learn to love well in a way that says that's meaningful to your spouse.
You know, Jeannie, I think a way that a lot of women can miss this in marriage, for instance, is they undercut what their husband wants most. The thing about what they want most, they say, geez, my husband, I go and I clean up the house all day long for him. I make sure the kids are taken care of. He comes home to a nice house, and yet what does he say? He wants to have sex. Geez, isn't that just... what I do just not good enough? And meanwhile, she's missing the point that the husband does appreciate all those things, but it's kind of like, yeah, you're doing all these things great, but there's this one great big need, and you're missing that need there.
Yeah, you're right. It's true. And a lot of women are not willing to communicate their needs to their husbands so that they'll be in a better position to love their husbands well, maybe physically. So I have women that observe our marriage and how well Scott is loving me. They're like, oh, I wish my husband would be like that. I wish he would do those things. And I'll say, do you tell them what would help you? What would help help you be in the mood? No. If I tell them, then it doesn't count. They should just know. And I always tell them, well, then you're never going to get it, because there's no way that a husband is going to know. Every woman's different, and we're different every day. So what works?
That's the other thing that's true.
So what works today, don't do that again tomorrow, because
today's not yesterday.
I don't feel that way today. But there is this way that we can talk to our spouses and say, I know you want to love me well, and I want to love you well. If you could just, and then fill in the blank, it would really help me to be able to also love you the way you need to be loved. But I do think a lot of women get the mistaken notion, and it's almost a popular way to think. I don't know if it's on the media, but that your husband is just like another child, like another one of the kids, making demands off of you. And here I've had kids hanging on me all day, and now my husband's hanging on me. Well, we have to remind ourselves and remember that they're not another child. We're not one with our children. This is our husband who we're one with, who we're to love as Christ, like we love Jesus. And I think that one of the best advice I'd ever been told was by our pastor's wife. She said, for most of us, our husbands have integrity and they are going to be faithful. So that means we're the only sex they get. We're the only physical pleasure they're going to have. So don't we want to be the only one that they want? Like when I really got that, I thought, okay, I'm all that Scott gets. I want to be all that he wants. I want to think outside this box, and that's a powerful place to be, that I'm the only sex he gets. I want to be the most amazing sex he could ever have. So that's just a different way to think, and it's very powerful, actually.
Yeah, and let's pick on the men here some as well. And I think there are too many men who are, let's just be clear and say, morons, who come home, they don't really address their wife, except, maybe it's just a hi. Sit down, plop their feet up on the footstool, get the remote, turn on the TV, ask their wives to bring them dinner, and then somehow keep wondering, geez, why doesn't my wife want to have sex with me in the evening?
Yeah, I would totally agree. There are a lot of what I call lazy husbands who make for lonely wives, who just don't try. And I understand there's a lot of times there's relational issues and there's bitterness and there's things that go on. There's the stress of work or financial pressure. There's a lot of stuff that comes against a couple. But I would just encourage husbands to really think sacrificially in terms of how they approach their wives, and just do the little things. A good kiss when you come home, and an embrace, a physical touch that's not sexual, holding hands or a hug, or turn off the TV, put down your phone, and have a conversation. And for a lot of men, that's not their strong suit. They don't like a lot of words. I'm a man of a few words myself, except when I'm writing. And so, conversation for me doesn't necessarily come natural. But I know that for Jenny to feel close to me, we have to have meaningful conversations beyond just functional things. So, yeah, guys need to wake up.
Find podcasts, videos, articles, and more at deeperwatersapologetics.com.
I'd like to remind everyone at this point you're listening to the Deeper Waters podcast, and everything we do here is listener supported. And reminder again, we could use someone who would be willing to volunteer to work with sound for us. If that's you, get in touch with me and let me know why I should give you that position, and we'll see what comes of it. But if you want to help us out, go to deeperwatersapologetics.com. It's my website. And there you'll find a link on the side that says Help Support the Work of Deeper Waters Christian Ministries. You go there, and it's the Ministry of Risen Jesus. You've gone to the right place. Mike and Debbie Lacona are my in-laws. And you make your donation, and you get in touch with Mike or Debbie or me or Ari and say, hey, I made a donation. I want to go to Nick Peters. I want to go to Deeper Waters. We'll get that donation, tax deductible entirely. You can go on Amazon and buy some ebooks that I've written, such as The Creed for the Ages, The Apostles' Creed in Today's Christian, or co-written, such as Defining Inerrancy, Groundless, God and Natural Disasters, etc. And, we're talking about marriage advice. Guys, you can buy this stuff called jewelry. Now, Jeannie, ladies love jewelry, generally, don't they?
We do. We like presents.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, listen up here, because, Jane was just talking about how, if you give that love, it makes it easier for them to surrender in every way. So here's some tips here to get that surrender that you're wanting. And that's better. You can go and buy jewelry at our jewelry store. It's through Premier Jewel, my friend Lena Klester. If you have any questions, just let me know. And whatever you purchase, 25% of that goes to Deeper Waters. So if you spend $100, we get 25. So you get something special for that lady in your life, and you get support of ministry at the same time. And like I always tell you guys, you can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up for that big screw-up that you recently did, or you can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up for that big screw-up that I know you're going to make with her. Now, do you two have any organization you'd like to see people donate to?
Yeah, so we actually don't have a nonprofit organization, so it's but I would appreciate if you want to go on Amazon and search The Path of Intimacy. My book is available there, both in Kindle form and also now just now released in paperback. So encourage you to go do that if you support our ministry.
Yeah, and I'd like to let you all know also, please consider going on iTunes and leave a positive review for the show. I really love to see it here. Now, when you're talking about all this, and Jean, I think many women don't realize what you just said earlier about, some women I know get so self-conscious because they look at themselves and they say, yeah, but look at all these other women out there. I mean, my husband is just watching them constantly. I'm sure he is. I mean, he has to be. And I tell him, look, here's what I'll tell you. If you are giving yourself to your husband regularly and he can count on it, his mind is going to be so full of you, but he's not going to really be able to look at other women that way. But if you don't, other women will suddenly look a whole lot more tempting.
Well, Nick, I think that's awesome that what you said, because it is true. Women don't believe it. I don't believe it. It's a fight for me every time. After all these years and how well Scott loves me, I still cannot believe that he likes the way I look. It's such a big thing. So he has to tell me constantly. He has to be willing for me to, when he does compliment me. There was a time in our marriage where he just got tired of giving me a compliment, and then I would just shoot it down and just point out isn't good. And so he was like, I'm done. Like that, I'm not. And that actually was really bad. I need to hear it all the time. Women need to hear that you love them every single day. They need to know that you would choose them again. They can't believe it. It's kind of like with the Lord. I can't believe he loves me. I can't believe I'm still forgiven. I can't believe that he sees me as the righteousness of Christ. I can't believe Scott could be attracted to me. I'm 57 years old. I don't look anything like when we got married. And it's so hard for me to believe that he would want me. But his actions, the way his eyes light up, the gifts he gives me, lingerie that he buys me, that he finds out what I feel good in, what he's asked me, what makes me feel attractive. And then that is really, really helpful.
Yeah. And, to me, it just blows my mind, but women don't seem to see it. And what I tell women about this also, like, if you are telling your husband this, that he really doesn't see you that way and such, you may not realize it, but implicitly, you're calling your husband a liar.
Yeah, it's just that it's just part of society, the way we're raised, that if I cannot believe that you would want to see me in this. And I've talked to friends who are very attractive, and they'll say, no, I will not wear that item. I would never wear a thong. I would never wear anything like that, because I know how I look. All I have to do is look in the mirror. But I always say to them, ask your husband what he wants you to wear. Ask your husband what he wants to see. And it's really hard. It's a battle for wives. So husbands have to realize that it might be baby steps. It might be, turn on the candlelight, be very forgiving with the light in the room. Let them get used to the fact that you do like the way they look. It's really a battle.
Yeah, I often tell husbands that you are probably the only ally that your wife has in the battle for their body image.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
Everything else, society, media, other women, everywhere is telling wives, how unattractive they are, and buy this product, or cut your hair a certain way, or wear this, buy these kinds of clothes, and then you'll be attractive. And there's so much messages against women and their own self-image that the husband is probably one of the few allies in that battle. And so he needs to be a strong advocate, and he needs to tell her every day something that he finds attractive about her. Could be just her hairstyle, the way she wears her makeup that day, the colors she has on. It could be something, specifically physical about her, but she needs, like what Jenny just said, she needs to hear something every day, and it needs to be sincere. And I have no doubt that he thinks those things a lot. Most men do think about the attractiveness to their wives, but they don't say them. And so I'm just encouraging guys, say it out loud, and say it often.
Yeah, Scott, we're actually not looking for supermodels, are we?
No, absolutely not. We're looking for someone who we can really know, who is willing to give to us fully, and that we can have that kind of intimacy with. And that's super attractive.
I've told women this before and said, your husband would really much rather have, say, a plain Jane in the bedroom who's totally into him than to have a supermodel who's just passive and has no interest in him. Would you agree with that, Scott?
It's absolutely true. Yeah, and it comes back to what Jenny was saying about men want to feel wanted. It's part of that respect need that they have.
Yep.
That they want to feel attractive, that they want to feel desired, and that their wife finds them so. Mm-hmm. And it's really important. Really important.
Sometimes women, I'll notice that they seem to open up a little bit to this idea that their husband could actually want them. When we talk about the fact that your husband loves it that you're theirs. Mm-hmm. Like, Scotty loves me and wants me because I'm his. He knows I'm his, and only his. And that is so desirable and attractive to him. And that, I feel like, oh, well, I can be that. I feel like I'm going to be a disappointment in, I don't like the way my body looks. It doesn't matter what a woman looks like. Mm-hmm. She's not satisfied. She feels like a disappointment. Yeah. And so if we can find these ways where we can connect and really believe that our husband, even if I have to pretend that I am sexier than I feel like I am, the benefits of that is great, because I can tell by his response that he really does find me attractive, and that he wants me.
Yeah, I often tell people, for me, the highest compliment I ever receive anymore, it's not about apologetics. Those are really good to hear, but it's not the highest. The highest I receive anymore is when someone comes in and says, gosh, you really do love your wife, don't you? And at that point, I am just beaming with pride and such, and say, yep, you better know it, and don't you dare ever question it. Yeah. And I'm generally a mild-mannered guy, but the thing that will tick me off the most and get me going into practically a rage is if someone insults her and then stay out of the way. I think it's, if you watch my Facebook, there's an unwritten rule on my page and her page. If you insult Allie, stay out of the way. Her husband will see it, he will come, and he will not be happy with you.
Yeah, we feel fiercely protective of our wives. It's true.
And hopefully our marriages can even be used for evangelism. Yeah. Scott and I have been places. We were at a bank one time, sitting, talking to, we were opening an account, and the guy said, okay, what's your secret? Like, how long have you been married? Why are you so happy? We haven't said anything or done anything. And people can just see it. They can tell by the way you treat each other. We had a couple ask us to give them premarital counseling, and they'd only seen us before. They never talked to us, but they could tell the way we were around each other, the way we looked at each other and talked to each other and treated each other. They just said, that's what we want. Mm-hmm. So, and then when you tell them what our secret is Jesus Christ. It's learning to love like he loves us. It's knowing him and knowing what grace looks like, knowing what forgiveness looks like, knowing what laying down your life for someone looks like. It's all about him.
And, gee, I'm thinking about, I had a friend who got married back in 2016, and one of the best things he said to me was, yeah, I've seen the way you treat Allie. I want that as well. And I'm thinking also that this gets into the whole thing you've said about that the women have already been chosen by us. And I can say on my end, I'm sure it's not going to come as a shock, but I am a total nerd. Nerd entirely. And something I tell women, say, look, if you want to get a husband who is really devoted to you, one of the best things you can do is marry a nerd. Because a nerd is just becoming, oh my gosh, what, you actually want me, you actually pick me, I can't believe it, you are so awesome!
Yeah, that's true.
That is actually something Scott and I have talked about, the fact that we both are in awe of the fact that the other person loves us. Mm-hmm. We both had some things in our childhood where we felt unloved, and I think we've just remained in awe of the love that the other has. So it does help you not take it for granted, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I I think I'm much the same way. I mean, I look at myself as a guy who got passed over by most every single other person because I'm obviously not the muscular stock and such, and then along comes Ari, and we're married within a year's time because she's absolutely crazy about me, and I love that.
That's awesome.
And yeah, we're working on year 8 right now.
That's fabulous.
So yeah, we're getting close to have up time here. Scott, what would, if you could talk to the husbands right now, what would you say? If you could talk to the wives, what would you say?
So I'll address husbands and I'll let Jenny address the wives. But to me, for husbands, I would say the best thing you can do is to study and understand and encounter the love of Jesus. Because in that you find everything you need for how to love your life, how to love your wife well. And so study the Gospels, study how Jesus loves people, pray and dialogue with him, and understand what it is the love of Christ means for you in terms of grace, forgiveness, passion, intensity, desire. All those dimensions of God's love is shown to us in Jesus. And so if you study those things and really get to know them and then can turn around and love your wife like that, that's the best thing you can do.
Scott, you should address the wives on what they should know about their husbands.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so one of the things, I guess, I think we touched on this earlier, but this issue of needs and understanding needs. And I've always been, once or twice a year, do polls on my blog to ask people kind of what their hot button issues are and what their needs are, whether or not they're being met and that kind of stuff. And so I think one of the things that for both men and women is to understand what your spouse's top needs are and have that conversation. It can be a little bit difficult because sometimes you feel defensive about the fact that maybe you haven't had those needs met in the past. But the most important thing about that conversation is to express. So let's just say for a wife, and she wants to have more romance. She doesn't feel like her husband's being romantic. If a husband isn't good at that naturally, and many husbands aren't, and his wife comes and says, "Honey, I really need you to be more romantic toward me," most guys are going to be clueless about exactly how to do that. So the question that you have to ask specifically is to say, okay, I would love to do that. Can you tell me what that would look like for you? Does that mean going on more dates? Does that mean me bringing you flowers? Does that mean us holding hands when we're walking in public? Does that, what does that look like to you? Because for one wife and another wife, the answer to being more romantic might look completely different. And the same is true for husbands. If I tell Jenny, I really, respect is really important for me, or if sexual intimacy is really important for me, then we have to have that specific conversation. Okay, so let's just take the example of sexual intimacy. What does that having that need met look like? And we can talk in terms of frequency. We can talk in terms of, the details of what that would look like. And those can be hard conversations to have because it tends to bring up kind of difficult past or unmet needs, and that can be hurtful. But you need to get past those conversations and approach them with grace.
And Jeannie, what would you say to the husbands and what would you say to the wives?
I'll try to keep it short. So I would say, husbands, your wives really want to feel understood. So that means you have to listen to them talk. And I would also say, for the husbands, just if you could ask her each day, what's one thing I could do today to help make your day better? Or what is one thing I can do today that would make you feel more loved? And at first she may not tell you, she'll want you to figure it out. And, just be willing to pursue because she really does want it. She may not know how to express it yet. She might not be used to your asking. She may be suspicious. and you're just trying to get sex, and what you are is wanting connection.
Yep.
You can use those words. That's great. For women, take baby steps for connecting with your husband sexually. Start, go ahead and have all the lights off and be under the covers, but get in bed with your husband naked or wear lingerie. Try to connect. Find something that you're willing to do as far as baby steps. Send him a text in the middle of the day that you're thinking about him. Just do something small, make the baby steps. Hold hands more. Let him, surprise him on a date. Surprise him with just your intentions and your desire for him. And if you do that, then arousal and desire is going to wake up in you as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to let everyone know the book is The Path of Intimacy. Right now, as of this recording on Amazon, the paperback is $9.79. The Kindle is $3.99. And this is a short book, but it's a powerful one. I read a lot of it on Super Bowl Sunday, actually, because I have no interest in football whatsoever. But it's a great one to go through. There's a lot to get out of it. Now, do you all have a blog, website, and email where people can get in touch if they want to find out more?
Yeah, so my website is heavenmademarriage.com. And you can contact me through my first name, Scott, at heavenmademarriage.com.
Okay. And do you all have any final words you'd like to leave for the listeners of Deeper Waters podcast?
Really enjoyed our time together today. Thank you so much. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about what we talked about today.
And your marriage is worth it. Take time to invest in it.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to remind everyone that next week we're still working on it, but I've got a couple of interesting prospects. Now, either one of them would be a thrilling show. But for now, I'm Nick Peters, and I am signing off.